Good morning. Welcome to King's Report, the 24th day, yes, in the 5th month, in the 16th year of Chungi, Tamil saying for the second king of Chungi, Cheongjin-lun. Let me just fix this light just a bit so it doesn't quite shine in my eyes so much. All right. And let's go to where we always go, see what's going on around the kingdom. And right now, at the Chongpyeong, Tennessee, currently 71 degrees. Periods of clouds and sun with a gusty thunderstorm, not as warm, but humid, and getting up to 77 today. And then tonight, getting down to 62, a thunderstorm in spots early this evening, otherwise partly cloudy. And yeah, this is the key word for this time of year, humid. And then in father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province in Korea, 79 right now, mostly cloudy, getting down to 69 tonight. Overcast, warm, and humid. Evening rain, some heavy. And a thunderstorm followed by heavy showers late tomorrow, 78 for a high, cloudy and humid. At the Cheonrygung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, partly sunny and hot, breezy this afternoon. Couple of, right now, 67, but hot and breezy this afternoon. Getting up to 90 degrees. Couple of afternoon thunderstorms around, some severe. Tonight, getting up to 61, a strong thunderstorm in spots this evening. Otherwise, clear, partly cloudy, and not humid, breezy. Okay. Okay. And then at the Liberty Rock RV Parking Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 75 degrees. Mostly clear, getting up to 93 today, 93, mostly sunny and humid. A thunderstorm in spots this afternoon. And then tonight, humid with increasing clouds, low of 74. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, right now, 75 with some clouds getting down to 73, cloudy and humid. Tomorrow, cloudy and very humid. A morning thunderstorm in parts of the area, followed by a little rain in the afternoon, high of 84. And at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, currently 87 and partly cloudy. Thunderstorm in spots this evening, otherwise humid with thickening clouds. And then getting down to 72 tonight. Tomorrow, getting up to 90 degrees, partly cloudy, very warm, and yep, you got it, humid. And at Ilan, Taiwan, currently 87 degrees and clear, becoming cloudy tonight, getting down to 78. Tomorrow, hot with clouds giving way to some sun, a stray afternoon thunderstorm. Danger of dehydration and heart stroke if outside for extended periods of time. High of 94. So Ilan takes the prize today, as they should, since they are in a subtropical region. Okay. All right. So, all right, let's go to Father's Word. Okay. And we are where now? We are in True Family, the book on true families, and chapter 7, which is titled The Love of True Husbands and Wives. Okay. Chapter 7, and then section 1 under chapter 7. And section 1 is subtitled The Original Husband-Wife Relationship of Creation. In other words, according to God's original ideal of creation. God exists as the dual characteristics of plus and minus. If this is the first time you're hearing that, but you need to go find yourself a lecture on divine principle. Okay. All right. Anyway, God exists as dual characteristics of plus and minus. And Adam is the 불립시킨 것이 불립. And I've always tried to figure out how should I translate 불립? And 불립 would mean sort of, take it and make it independent. For example, you take something from, for example, can't think of a good example, or I can't even think of a bad example. But it means, I think so. Projection, I think, is what we usually say. So Adam is the projection of the plus, and Adam, the man, is the projection of the plus, and Eve, the woman, is the projection of the minus. July 19th, 1970. Okay. Let's look here for another little more reading. That we look at a little more meaty, but perhaps Father's giving us this today because the Supreme Court has ruled against, or ruled actually in favor of, a Tennessee law that outlaws transgender surgeries on minors. And so perhaps Father's happy about that, and perhaps he's giving us this quotation today, I suspect. Okay. And yes, there are two genders, two sexes, two genders. And that's it. That's it. But so much right now, is really sort of mixed up in the world after the fall. And we've come all this way, and sort of as a result of 6,000 years of biblical history, maybe hundreds of thousands of years of actual history, we have sort of this very stark divide between good and evil. And remember what good and evil are. Good is what contributes to God's will, and evil is what hinders God's will. And so these two things are going in opposite directions. And there is this huge struggle right now. And we already know which side is going to win, because one side has already won. And as I was pointing out, was it yesterday, that on 9/23, September 23rd, 2017, for the first time in history ever, including the Garden of Eden, for the first time in history ever, we had one man, one woman blessed by God at the cosmic perfection level. So one with each other, one with God. That did not happen in the Garden of Eden, but it has now happened now in 2017, and almost 8 years since that took place. And so evil is really making kind of its last stand, or it's a rear guard action, I suppose you could say, where it is trying to extend its life as much as possible. But it's now just a matter of time before God's kingdom is established. God's kingdom being established means that we establish a society, a human society, that encompasses the globe. And, if people are colonizing Mars by that time, then also Mars, or whatever spaceship is going where no man has gone before, whatever, God, wherever human beings exist, there will be God's community of faith, and there will be what in the family pledge we refer to as the Shimjong world of Shimjong culture. It was Shimjong being what? Pop quiz. Irrepressible impulse of the heart to invest love in an object partner so as to experience love and joy. Alrighty then, let's go and see what is happening right now. Fortunately, President Trump still is struggling. He has not, done anything foolish since we ended our Wednesday session 23 hours ago. I was thinking, this must be the most difficult time in his life. I think that in the future, if he ever sort of writes an autobiography or if he sort of speaks to a biographer later on, I have a feeling that these days will be the ones that he will describe as his most difficult, regardless of what decision he may eventually come to. He says no one knows what he's going to do. And so let's discount all the speculation that is going on. And he says that he does not want to make a decision until the very last second before it is due. And but we see that Russian President Putin is saying that the world is millimeters away from nuclear catastrophe. Let me get the exact wording that he used here. But and Pakistan is saying that if Iran is attacked specifically by Israel, the nuclear weapon, then they will retaliate with a nuclear weapon against Israel. China, of course, is not speaking too much, but I'm sure that China also is looking at this situation very seriously. Let's see here. Okay. I can't find it right offhand. But it's clear right now that if the United States goes to war against Iran, it will also be going to war against Pakistan, Russia, and China. Russia and China are deeply dependent on Iran for their cheap gas and oil. China has even built a railroad connecting their territory to Iran so that oil and gas can be transported over land and not be hindered by U.S. sanctions. And China right now certainly needs this kind of a very cheap energy in order to subsidize its failing economy. And Russia, of course, is subject to all sorts of sanctions. And one thing that people are saying is that, well, Trump's own director of national intelligence is saying as recently as March that the U.S. Intelligence community does not believe that Iran is seeking a nuclear weapon. President Trump is sort of discounting that, and I can see why he would. He's been lied to by the intelligence community many, many times before during his first term. But also we have this situation, and I talked about it, I think, earlier this week, where countries like North Korea, and perhaps also now Iran, equate nuclear weapons with protection of their sovereignty. And this idea that North Korea, for example, has convinced itself that as long as they have nuclear weapons, no one will dare to attack them. And even though President Trump is right that Iran has no economic need for peaceful nuclear power because they have cheap oil and gas. And so he does not believe that they are producing or developing nuclear power or for the sake of or nuclear technology for the sake of energy. because whatever energy that they get from nuclear power will be more expensive, significantly more expensive than what they already have with their oil and gas. But it may be, I could be wrong, but it may be that Iran has also looked at North Korea and said, look at North Korea and look at, for example, Libya, all right? Look at Libya, see what happened with Libya. Libya gave up their nuclear ambitions and they got bombed back to the Stone Age by the United States. And Gaddafi was killed as a result of after he gave up nuclear ambitions. And so Iran may say, well, look at North Korea. North Korea is safe and sound, and no one dares touch them. No one dares attack them. Shouldn't we be like North Korea rather than like Libya? And in the modern world, I think there's a pretty good argument for that. The reality of the modern world, maybe. And the United States may have created that kind of logic unintentionally, but certainly seems to have done so by effectively allowing North Korea to develop nuclear weapons. In other words, kicking the can down the road and appeasing, compromising until finally North Korea actually now has nuclear weapons and has even put into their constitution that they are a nuclear state. And now, objectively speaking, there's really nothing the United States can do about it unless they are going to go all the way and wipe North Korea off the map, which they're not going to do. The United States is not going to do unless North Korea strikes first. So Iran may be looking at it in that way. Father's perspective on this, I think it's pretty obvious. Father was very much against the United States going to war against Iraq, the first Iraq war. And he tried his best to prevent President Bush from doing that. He tried to reach President Bush with a message: don't go there. If yes, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and annexed Kuwait, that's bad. Something needs to be done about it, but it doesn't have to be the United States that does it. You can have another country do the dirty deed, and the United States avoid this war with an Islamic country. And here, and since then, of course, the United States has gone to war with Afghanistan. It's gone to war with, I guess the war with Syria is basically over now. But now we have Iran. Now we have Iran. There is a debate going on in Congress over what powers the president has in this situation. And Rand Paul, where at least I often respect what Rand Paul says about issues, and he's saying that there's no constitutional authority for the president to bomb anyone without asking permission first. Of course, presidents have been bombing people for a long time. Obama, all right, apparently bombed or at least dropped more bombs on foreign countries than any other president. I think I saw someone say. Obama, right? The one that got the Nobel Peace Prize, right? That's right. Anyway, lawmakers are debating what role Congress should play as the White House weighs its options on Iran. Does the legislative body have sole power to declare war? Or should that power be ceded to the president? The back and forth comes as President Donald Trump mulls whether to join Israel in its campaign against Iran or continue pushing for a diplomatic end and return to the negotiating table to hammer out a nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic. Helping to ignite the arguments on Capitol Hill are a pair of resolutions in the Senate and House that would require debate and a vote before any force is used against Iran. The measures are designed to put a check on Trump's power and reaffirm Congress's constitutional authority. Senators on both sides of the aisle are divided on whether they believe they have sole authority to authorize a strike against Iran, or if Trump can do so on his own volition. A predominant argument is that the entire point of supporting Israel is to prevent the Islamic Republic from creating or acquiring a nuclear weapon. Israel has been successful in taking out a few pieces of infrastructure that were key to that mission, but has yet to do real damage to the highly fortified Fordo fuel enrichment plant and would likely need help from the U.S. to crack through the layers of rock shielding the site. The Constitution says the prerogative to declare war, the power to declare war, is solely from the Congress. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, told Fox News Digital, it can originate from the White House. There is no constitutional authority for the president to bomb anyone without asking permission first. The Constitution divides war powers between Congress and the White House, giving lawmakers the sole power to declare war, while the president acts as the commander-in-chief directing the military. Then came the War Powers Act of 1973, which sought to further define those roles and ensure that the president has to give Congress notice within 48 hours of the deployment of troops, which can only be deployed for 60 days. Notably, Congress has not formally declared war since World War II. That's right. The last time Congress declared war was in 1942 against Romania. Romania was under Nazi rule at that time. And so, after declaring war against Germany and Italy, Congress declared war against Romania as well. But it's amazing that since then, the United States has almost continuously been at war, right? But there's not been an actual declaration of war since 1942. And this is because Congress has ceded the responsibility. They don't want to take responsibility. So Korea, at that time, the Truman administration kept saying, oh, no, this is not a war. It's not a war. It's not a war. What is it then? It's a police action. That's what they said. It was a police action, not a war, not a war. Korean War was not a war. And the Vietnam War was not a war. Okay. Vietnam War was not a war. And Afghanistan, Iraq, all these were not wars. They were not declared by Congress. And they were done under the president's power, especially after 1973, under the War Powers Act. It's not so much, a matter of presidents acting as dictators. It's a matter of Congress refusing to stand up and take responsibility. We don't want to take responsibility. If the president wants to send our young people into war, that's on him, this kind of thing. And on this, I really agree with Rand Paul, especially because President Trump, we voted for President Trump because we understood him to be the peace president, and his track record in the first term was a pretty good foundation for seeing him as a peace president, not creating any new wars or expanding America's involvement in an existing war during his 4 years in office, and the only president in recent memory to do so. Other presidents have started wars, they've expanded wars, and then walked off with the Nobel Peace Prize. President Trump didn't do that. And so, of course, the Nobel Peace Prize committee completely ignored him. But anyway, if he's going to shift course now and saying, you know what, I know I said that during my campaign, but right now I have no choice. If he's going to say that, then go to Congress, have a joint session of Congress, and give a speech that convinces the majority of people in Congress that this is something that we have to do as Americans, however reluctantly. Now, already, I think most of the American population is actually already for him, already supporting. If he goes to war without going to Congress, I think close to half, or maybe even a little bit more than half of Americans will support him. But I think he should go to Congress. First of all, it's not something that requires immediate action, right? He's been sort of teasing, shall we say, or sort of, various stories have been leaked and or speculation has been going on now for days. So what's another 1 or 2 or 3 more days, or even a week, that it might take for him to write a speech and go to Congress and convince the majority of Congress that this is something that we have to do. And then Congress can have time, to debate or something like that, but debate and vote, whatever they want to do. And here Rand Paul also says there's really no argument for why he couldn't obey the Constitution. Now, my hope is that he won't do it. His instincts for restraint would prevail. That's a very important phrase. President Trump does have instincts for restraint. He's not a globalist. He's not looking for places to explode ammunition or weapons so that the weapons makers and ammunition makers in America can hire more people and produce more stuff and increase the GDP that way. He's not that kind of person. He's not Lindsey Graham. But Lindsey Graham, is already he's out there saying war, 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 war. He's basically calling for war. Senator John Kennedy disagreed with Paul and said he believed Trump had the ability to authorize the strike. Well, he does. And I think legally that may be true. Kennedy may be right. But aside from what he's legally able to do, I think Trump should do what is right, not what he can. He probably can. His lawyers will tell him, and Kennedy will also tell him that, yeah, you have the right, you have the ability to do this without Congress's approval. Okay, I agree, but still, go to Congress. But acknowledged it was mixed and clouded when factoring in the War Powers Act. It's clear that both Congress and the president have a role to play, said, but if you're suggesting should the president come to Congress first making that decision, it's conditioned upon what year you want Congress to make a decision. Sometimes it takes us months, even years, to get nothing done. Okay, well, that is true. And if Congress takes too long, then he can go ahead and do it on his own. Okay. Senate Majority Leader John Thune told reporters he believed Trump was perfectly in his right to do what he has done so far, and reiterated that the ultimate goal was to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. But this whole thing about non-proliferation, it failed with North Korea. Completely, totally failed with North Korea. And now it's about to fail with Iran. So it's not just about Israel. Because if Iran succeeds, then what's to stop other countries from doing this? And that's the question that a question that President Trump has to deal with also. Okay. What's to prevent Venezuela, all right, or other countries from doing this kind of thing? Senate Republicans, Trump was perfectly right to do what he's done. The ultimate goal was to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Okay. Senate Republicans have found an unlikely ally among Democrats and Senator John Fetterman, who has vehemently advocated for Israel while his party has wavered. But and this is, I'm looking at this separately from advocating or not advocating for Israel. It's about a radical warmongering country, whether it's Islamic or Baptist or Presbyterian, is not important. It's a radical warmongering country that is, despite what the intelligence community says, and in the president's judgment and in the judgment of many other people outside of the intelligence community, it is a country that is trying to develop a nuclear weapon. And I'm not sure why the intelligence community says that that this is not happening. I can see very well why. Not just the president, but also a lot of members of Congress are very skeptical about that judgment by the intelligence community. Here, Fetterman told Fox News he did not believe the strike on Iran was starting a war, echoing Thune's sentiment that we have a very specific mission to destroy the nuclear facilities. That's not a war. That is a necessary military exercise to destroy a nuclear facility. Okay. If the Korean War was not a war, then I guess this also you could say is not a war. So what is a war then, right? What is a war? We finally figured out what a woman is, I guess. Maybe we haven't, I don't know, but I think we have, right? But we still don't know what a war is. This is really, people use language like this to justify all sorts of stuff. Remember Bill Clinton? Depends on what is. Depends on the meaning of is. When he was trying to justify his sexual dalliances. Anyway, uh, it is a necessary military exercise. It's so also, remember Russia's operation in Ukraine also is not a war, right? It's a, what is it? A military operation? Is that what they call it? I think so, yeah. Military operation. So, praise to be to God. We've come to, there are no more wars. We've come to a world where there are no more wars. God's kingdom has come. There are no more wars. I don't know what to say. If uh, we twist language so far that it just becomes meaningless, I guess. All right. Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, told Fox News Digital it's never been ruled whether the War Powers Act was constitutional, but he noted that the act still gave the president the authority to act as commander in chief. I think it's pretty much an irrelevant point if President Trump decides to aid Israel with some military action with those bunker busting bombs. Johnson said it is well within the time frame of him coming under some kind of congressional action. And Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, who introduced the War Powers Resolution Monday, believed the measure was gaining momentum among his colleagues, and this resolution would limit President Trump's ability to do this on his own. Kaine told Fox News that as events have developed, it made the urgency of the resolution more apparent. He also expected it would get a vote in the Senate sometime next week. Sometime next week. Well, I guess Kennedy is right. Sometimes it takes a year for them to do anything. He argued that some Republicans would very much want to be in the middle of hostilities with Iran. Yes, and very much so. Lindsey Graham wants to be in the middle of hostilities with Iran. Yes, and he's openly calling for it. But the interesting thing is they've never introduced a war authorization because their constituents would say, "Are you nuts?" He said. And so they would like the president to do it, but they wouldn't want to do it themselves. And yeah, I think Kaine really shows that this is, but his people, Obama, also didn't go to Congress, remember, and Biden didn't go to Congress. Carter didn't go to Congress. When asked if that was a move to shift blame elsewhere, Kaine said, they think it will, but it won't. Okay. All right, so President Trump still at this hour, looks like, is struggling over this decision. And I think what we can do is to pray for the president, pray that, pray for him that, God is with him and he needs to know that God is with him. And I think, was it Lindsey Graham that he has an instinct for restraint. And I think he needs to follow his own instincts, Now, in this case, Father said in the case of Iraq, the U.S. should give some other country the leading role in going after Saddam Hussein, invading Iraq and liberating Kuwait from Iraq. But in this case, apparently the United States is the only country that has this weapon that can go through all the sort of the rock and everything else that is protecting this nuclear facility. So either the United States does it or it doesn't get done. But I just wonder, I just wonder, hasn't Israel already degraded Iran's ability to build nuclear weapons to some extent? And if so, doesn't that give more time for negotiation, or or for regime change, some sort of regime change in Iran? Of course, the best thing to happen here would be that the people of Iran would somehow get their act together and throw out the dictatorial regime. And apparently, the vast majority of the people of Iran do not approve of their current government, even though sort of elections and polls may say otherwise. But this is what we hear, that people of Iran want to be liberated from this dictatorial regime. But liberate yourselves. Come on, liberate yourselves. Freedom is won when we liberate ourselves, not when someone else comes along and liberates us. We need to take responsibility ourselves, putting our lives on the line. Yes, people will die. That is the cost of liberty. Don't expect American young people to die for your liberation, for your freedom. You need to put your own young people on the firing line and win your liberation, win your freedom that way. Iran has been under this dictatorial Islamic regime now for 50 years, or close, roughly 50 years, give or take. And I think it's about time that they took responsibility for their own freedom and carried out a regime change. Netanyahu has said, hey, listen, we've killed a lot of the top people, and even within the last 24 hours, Israel bombed a place where military leaders were hiding out and apparently killed most or all of them. And so it would seem that this would be a pretty good time for someone in Iran to sort of wave a flag and sort of storm the Bastille, or whatever the equivalent would be in Iran today. And we'll have to see. Look at the way that East European countries won their liberation after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's continue to pray for President Trump. He needs our prayers now more than ever. Absolutely more than ever. Whatever decision he makes, it will possibly mark his presidency one way or the other. One way or the other. Okay. Alrighty then. Let's see here. Okay, we have a story. Okay, China stockpiling nuclear weapons at record speed to challenge the U.S. Okay, we know that. Okay. Let's see. North Korea sending 6,000 army personnel to Russia, Kremlin says. And this, of course, is violating UN resolutions, UN sanctions. But the UN has lost so much credibility and authority that North Korea is not going to give that a second thought. And these are apparently engineers, so combat engineers, they say, whether that's true or not. But mainly the purpose here is for North Korea to be paid. Either they may be paid in rubles, or more likely they'll be paid in food, I think, so as to prop up the Kim Jong-un regime, or they'll be paid in some other way. But somehow North Korea is sort of a fundraising in this way by sending their people off to the Ukraine front. North Korea leader Kim Jong-un is committed to send about 6,000 engineers and construction workers to the Kursk region According to a June 17 statement quoted by Russian state-run news agency TASS, Kursk is a border region that has been heavily contested by Russia and Ukrainian forces. At the end of April, Russia claimed to have retaken the area since Ukrainian forces first entered it in mid-2024. Chairman of the State Affairs of DPRK, Kim Jong-un, has decided to send 1,000 sappers to Russia to clear mines on Russian territory. And how are they going to do that, right? I hate to think of the way that North Korea does that. Okay, company march forward, as well as 5,000 military construction workers to restore infrastructure destroyed by the occupiers, Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu said in a statement. TASS reported sappers are military combat engineers. Shoigu had arrived in North Korea's capital, Pyongyang, on behalf of Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss bilateral partnerships, which include the restoration of the Kursk region. TASS stated there are also plans to build memorials for the North Korean soldiers who died in the Russia-Ukraine war in Kursk. The construction of a museum in Pyongyang with the participation of the Russian side was discussed, the statement said, according to TASS. North Korea first revealed the supply of soldiers to Russia on April 28th. The deployment was part of a comprehensive strategic partnership Kim signed with Putin in 2024. Russia's ongoing war with Ukraine began with the former's incursion into Ukrainian territory in late February 2022, and Russia has admitted that North Korean forces were fighting alongside its military in the Kursk region. In April, when Russia said it retook Kursk, the Ukrainian military general staff dismissed the claim and said its soldiers continued to fight within Russia's borders. Okay, so forth and so on. So anyway, propaganda from both sides. We don't know who to believe. But here, the deepening ties between North Korea and Russia raised worries among the United States, South Korea, and their partners that Putin may in turn provide Kim with much needed sophisticated technologies that can help advance his nuclear and missile programs. And that's right. Aside from food, they do want a nuclear and missile technology. And that may be what's happening here. According to the latest statement quoted by TASS, Shoigu is visiting Pyongyang for the third time in nearly 3 months. There are talks of increased communication and collaboration between the two countries. That's a lot of visits, right? And he's kind of at the very top of the Russian power hierarchy, and he's been there now 3 times in 3 months. Flights and railway communication between Russia and North Korea are expected to resume. I hope that soon the first aircraft that has not flown for more than 30 years will take off, Shoigu said. So I guess the first aircraft, so in other words, scheduled airline. Anyway, right now the North Korean airline only flies to China, I believe. I think that's Mongolia. No, I think only to China. According to South Korea's Yonhap news agency, the latest development and continued use of North Korean workers and troops for operations against Ukraine by Russia has been termed deeply concerning by the U.S. State Department. North Korea's generation of income through soldier for hire schemes to Russia and other countries constitutes a violation of UN Security Council resolution, the State Department spokesperson said, according to Yonhap. Of course, North Korea for many years has been sending trainers to African countries. Dictators in Africa place high value on North Korean sort of trainers who come and train their security forces. And presumably North Korea has been paid for that by someone. The Epoch Times reached out to the State Department for further comment. And according to State Department resolution, they're not supposed to do this. And meanwhile, the war is intensifying in Ukraine with attack on critical infrastructure, despite efforts by the Trump administration to broker a peace deal between Russia and China. Okay, so 6,000 going there. Okay, and once they're there, who knows what they'll be doing? They're supposed to be engineers, but and doing reconstruction, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see what is going to be happening with that. All right, and let's see. this is, I mean, we should touch on this since I think Father gave us our REMA this morning with regard to this one. The Supreme Court decision on gender affirming care. And gender affirming, this is again the way that they twist language, right? Gender affirming means that boys play with trucks and girls play with dolls. That's gender affirming. Okay. But of course, the left has made it mean something entirely different. The court's 6-3 ruling means other states that have passed or considered laws similar to Tennessee's will likely survive legal challenges. Let's see what this is about. Yes. The Supreme Court has issued a major decision upholding Tennessee's ban on so-called gender-affirming care, such as puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for minors. This decision on June 18 will likely influence how states craft legislation and how other gender-related cases unfold in the legal system. In the case United States versus Skrmetti, a majority of the justices disagreed with the Biden administration's argument that Tennessee's law should undergo more rigorous scrutiny in the courts. Instead, Chief Justice John Roberts said in his majority opinion that courts should apply a less rigorous standard known as rational basis, under which states have to show that their law is rationally related to a state interest. The Tennessee law forbids all medical treatments intended to allow, quote, a minor to identify with or live as a purportedly identity inconsistent with the minor's sex, unquote, or to treat, quote, purported discomfort or distress from a disagreement between the minor's sex and asserted identity, unquote. Roberts wrote that about 1.6 million Americans older than 13 identify as transgender, meaning that their gender identity does not align with their biological sex. Here are some key takeaways from the decision and what to expect from future cases. Laws like Tennessee's are constitutional. Okay, so states across the country have passed or considered laws similar to Tennessee's. With the Supreme Court's new ruling, it seems more likely that such bans will survive future legal challenges. Roberts said courts shouldn't view the issue through the lens of sex-based discrimination, which would invite challenges to state laws under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The state law here forbids gender-affirming medical care based on the age of the patient as opposed to the patient's sex, he said. Okay, so what is the cutoff here? Is it 13? Tennessee determined that administering puberty blockers or hormones to minors to treat gender dysphoria, gender identity disorder, or gender incongruence carries risks, including irreversible sterility, increased risk of disease and illness, and adverse psychological consequences, the court said. The legislature found that minors lack the maturity to fully understand these consequences, that many individuals have expressed regret for undergoing such treatments as minors, and that the full effects of such treatments may not yet be known. The court has not previously held that transgender individuals are a suspect or quasi-suspect class. And this case, in any event, does not raise that question. Okay. A lower court has expressed concern about whether the Tennessee law discriminated based on transgender status. The majority opinion, however, seemed to give states an edge in opposing that type of argument in the future. That's because the Supreme Court said that the law didn't classify individuals based on transgender status. Without that classification, the court said it also didn't have to address whether the new class of individuals must receive special consideration under the law. I guess these are the, somehow these, I guess, are puberty blockers, I guess. Testosterone treatments for gender-related transitioning in Northern California. Okay. The court has not previously held that transgender individuals are a suspect or quasi-suspect class. Robert said in this case does not raise that question. And Alito disagreed on this point, saying that he was uneasy with the majority's analysis of the claim that the state law unconstitutionally discriminates. Alito is disagreeing with who? I think he's disagreeing with the lower court, isn't he? somehow these two paragraphs don't connect anyway. Okay. And liberal justices strongly dissent. You might suspect that. Yeah. Okay. Bostock doesn't apply. And questions remain about gender and the law. I'm sure they do. Okay. But they'll figure that out, I hope. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see. What are the headlines we have here in Breitbart? Iranian ballistic missile hits a hospital in Israel. And so Breitbart is crying out war crime. Well, I think it's kind of late to be crying war crime. I think a lot of crimes have been committed, and war itself is a crime. I know they have certain rules and so forth that people are supposed to follow, but listen, war is hell. And it's interesting that war represents something that you don't see in other parts of God's creation. And it's only because in human beings we have this contradiction within ourselves of good and evil that we have wars. And so I think war itself takes us below a level of creation. You have competition in other parts of God's creation for sure, but that's different from war, where you're actually creating weapons and bombs and stuff like that to annihilate the other side. And he's been going on for a long, long time for sure. Moses, of course, was involved in war. Joshua was involved in a series of wars and so forth and so on. But hey, I'm sorry, I forgot. We don't have war anymore. we don't have war anymore. I forgot. There are no more wars. We've redefined the word war so it doesn't exist anymore. Okay. Uh, all right, let's see here. Cargo theft reveals red flags in California commercial driver's license vetting for non-citizens. Okay. All right, let's see here. Oh, here we go. Carville, James Carville. Remember him? He's sort of the clown. The clown is the best way to describe him. He likes to say all sorts of really weird stuff. He's a Democrat strategist. And now he's saying Democratic Party, the most effective political party in the world. Okay. Yeah, James Carville, always good for a laugh. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, let's see here. Out of all categories, according to poll, Trump sees highest approval in immigration. Oh, by the way, apparently, not a single person entering the United States illegally during the month of May was released into the population. Not one. And that compares with 16,000 during May of last year when Obama, oh, sorry, not Obama, Biden was in charge. Well, actually, Obama was in charge of the auto pen stuff. Apparently, not a single illegal person entering the country illegally was released into the population during the month of May 2025. Wow. Yeah. So that, I think, is going to resonate with a lot of Trump supporters. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger went on what is it? One of those woke talk shows where the women sit around talking about how much they hate Trump. And they asked him, as an immigrant, doesn't it really offend you? Basically, I'm paraphrasing here. Doesn't really offend you what's happening in Los Angeles? And you know what? Did you see what Schwarzenegger said? He says, I came to this country at the age of 21, and America really embraced me. And of course, I was able to do a lot of stuff. Of course, he won, weightlifting champions, and he became popular, and he became governor of California, and starred in some movies and stuff like that. So obviously, he has done a great deal more here in the United States than he could have done back in his home country of Austria. But he said, I did stuff legally. And he said that people who do stuff illegally are really dumb, he said, really stupid. You do stuff legally. And if you don't do it legally, then you have a problem. And of course, you bring that problem on yourself. And these woke ladies were sort of astounded that they brought the wrong guy on. Who arranged for this guy to come here? But it's the idea that illegal immigration can be sort of talked about in the same way as legal immigration is something that the left has been trying to push on us for a long, long time. For example, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, a couple of days ago, saying, "Hey, without immigrants, Los Angeles will be nothing." All right, that's true, but does it have to be illegal immigrants? And as I said, I think this was on Tuesday, right? Actually, the answer to that is yes. Because why? Because you can exploit illegal immigrants. You don't have to pay them minimum wage, right? You don't have to pay the minimum wage. They're illegal. So yes, it does have to be illegal immigrants. And this is the point that the left tries to avoid. But anyway, kudos to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's an anti-Trumper, but all right, twice a day, a broken clock will give you the right time. So anyway, and that apparently was one of his times. All right, now look at this. Rahm Emanuel thinking of running for president in 2028. All right, he was near the center of power during the Clinton administration. I think, wasn't he chief of staff of the White House or something? And then later he became ambassador to Japan. He was also mayor of Chicago for a while, wasn't he? Anyway, now he's known for this saying, by the way, never let a crisis go to waste. And so perhaps it looks like he's going to be running for president in 2028. All right, so another white guy. Would he be better than Gavin Newsom? Probably, because he has, I think, not as much baggage as Newsom, right? With Newsom, you have the wildfires, you have the immigration stuff with Newsom, and Newsom has already shown that he has weak leadership. And Emanuel, I think, is, at least in terms of leadership, may be able to project a stronger leadership than Newsom. So, okay, yeah, maybe Rahm Emanuel, maybe he's someone that we need to watch out for in 2028. Okay. No, nonprofit hospitals still pushing DEI, childhood transgenderism, despite Trump's orders, of course, yeah. And so here, what should the U.S. do about Iran's key reactor? The fertile question. Yeah, it's a best thing would be regime change. And this is the same with the North Korea. As long as the current regime exists, North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear weapons, and Iran is not going to stop pursuing nuclear weapons. I think these two things can be said categorically. But the stipulation is that as long as the current regime exists in North Korea on the one hand and Iran on the other hand. So if you want Iran to stop pursuing a nuclear weapon, you can either, well, even if you destroy that that thing there. They'll just dig deeper. They'll just dig deeper. They'll come back. You need a regime change and perhaps a democratic regime would be less likely. But I don't know. I don't know. Would a democratic regime be less likely to pursue nuclear weapons? I don't know. UK is democratic. France is democratic, but they both have nuclear weapons. Who else has nuclear weapons? China, of course, but they're not democratic. US and Russia. Okay, I guess officially, but then Israel, of course, also has nuclear weapons, and it's generally referred to as a democracy. So yeah, maybe democracy is not a cure for nuclear weapons. Yeah. So what is? You know the answer. So do I. Join your group. Okay. All right. May his kingdom come. That is the only solution to the question of nuclear weapons. God bless Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly before we blow ourselves up. Okay. I'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully.